So these were the questions we posed to each other. And maybe we just ask the panelists, if you feel you don't have to feel like you have to answer each question. So the first is about the interaction between preprints and journals. How do they actually interact in the real world? How do they overlap, engage? And the question of, are preprints a threat to journals? And I think we can also say a threat to meetings. Who wants to pick that one first? John, go ahead.
This is live, right?
No, I don't think it's live. Can we get panel mics?
It's not lighting up. I think that one looks like it's got a light on it.
It sounds like it.
Yeah. I think that the question of interaction with journals is extremely important, and one of the things that we made a founding principle for bioRxiv was that a preprint server does not compete with journals. The journals provide that all-important step of certification through peer review, and that's something that bioRxiv will never do, and that we made very explicit right from the beginning. As Brooks alluded to the situation 5 years ago, many journals in biology were either unclear about their preprint policy or actively against it, against preprints, but frankly, with lobbying and conversation and also with exposure and also hearing from authors, many journals have changed their policies or at least clarified them. And I think now, I can't think of many journals in the experimental in biology field that still have a policy that says they will not consider a manuscript that's been posted to a preprint server. So I think the thing with journals in biology, we've kind of got to a good place. With medicine, there are still concerns, I think entirely reasonably, and that's a conversation that we would like to have with the journals concerned to explain what we are doing and how we are doing it, and listen to what journal editors think about the processes that we have and be prepared to modify them appropriately. Do you want to say something about, we could talk about meetings maybe separately.
Yeah, so to follow on, I think that's a key thing about preprint servers is to try to make sure we're not trying to be journals, and I know at SSRN as everywhere, we spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, what can we do, what don't we do? How are we distinctive from journals, and how do we do something that might serve a need that is not being met by journals? And I think some of the examples here about, journals don't typically publish posters or negative results. It's hard to publish on a journal. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about what do researchers need to share, what do they produce that doesn't have a home, and how might a preprint server like SSRN or the other ones be a place where that content can be shared to the benefit of others. I think too, there's a lot of, it's really interesting to hear the cool things that bioRxive's doing about the relationships with the journals that can submit papers straight from the preprint server to the journal. We're on the verge of launching, in the next month or so, we'll be announcing a first look program that we're setting up with journals or societies who might want to have, for a journal that wants to have a preprint server of its own, they could do it as part of a first look. It would be their preprint server hosted by SSRN. And so the idea would be that, for instance, it could be papers under consideration. So a paper could be submitted to a journal. The journal could say, are you interested in sharing it as a preprint? They say yes. It comes to that journal's branded space on SSRN. So that's a way that preprint servers could work with journals, and we're always trying to think about the right ways to not replicate or compete, but do something unique. He said it's working. He said that one's working.
Okay, good.
Oh, yes, it is. So just to complement a few things. I think we want to move, all of us, and we need your help, to move to a set of common practices that allow preprints and journals to optimize what each of them do and do well, and have really clear communication about that. The 25 years of research with SSRN, as Shirley mentioned, it was started because of concerns about delays in publication, and with archive.org have shown clearly that preprints accelerate research. That's really good. They give credit to students, and it's not just that they also expose content that otherwise wouldn't be published, they help research, and that's really good. They help transparency and so forth. At the same time, when I talk about integrity of science, the very first point I make is how much in society depends on peer-reviewed publications. There's numerous examples about that, and we did this, and this was actually many of the conversations we had with our community in starting ESOR, was make sure that there's a clear distinction between what's a preprint and what's a peer-reviewed publication. And so we need to value both of them and work towards an ecosystem where we optimize how both of them work. And that really, it's great to speak here and have a panel on this because it really involves the entire SSP community and publishing community at large.
Thanks. So in the interest of time, we've got about 5 more minutes for the panel to talk. So I'm going to ask each of you to pick one of the remaining 3 questions to answer. Here's the list of questions. I'll put it in front of you. Shirley, do you want to go first?
I know which one I pick. I pick number 4, the next big direction. So I think, I sort of alluded to part of that, our First Look program that I'm really excited about. One of the things I love about working at SSRN and being a part of the group is there's a lot of innovation that happens, and we're able to be this nimble space, yes, within the Orange Monster, but still kind of nimble and try new things. So we're launching this First Look program. If anybody out there is interested in talking to me about that, I would love to talk to you about giving journal branded space within our community. We're also, as I said, kind of doing this restructuring to try to think about the best ways to streamline and be more efficient with the way that we process papers and dig into the kinds of needs that are perhaps unmet at this time. And then we're building new networks, so moving into new areas. We'll probably launch another 6 to 8 this year. So that's kind of the new stuff that's happening at SSRN this year.
Thanks. John?
So I'm also interested in the future.
Can you speak?
Oh, sorry, yes. So I'm going to answer the same question. I'm sorry if you're more interested in some of the others, but you can ask those questions. Our next big thing at bioRxiv is going to be moving to full-text XML, which we're in the process of doing right now. That's going to make a lot of other things possible. We're going to be able then to include things like multimedia rather than consign, say, video files to downloadable supplemental data. We could have runnable software. We're interested in talking with organizations that want to create content with an XML first workflow and import that directly into bioRxiv. We also are wanting to improve our search capability. I think we've been told many times now that bioRxiv search sucks. That's a direct quote from a very senior academic. And it does, and we need to be better at it. So we're looking into that. But I think the other really interesting thing in a sort of socio-cultural way is the idea of creating conversation around preprints and capturing that conversation, which we're doing at the moment by incorporating, bringing in tweets and links to tweets and links to blog posts. But there's an emerging set of preprint review projects being run by people like the Company of Biologists and others. And they are separate sites, but we are linking out from a preprint to a place where that preprint is discussed. And I think further down the line, one would like to find ways of incorporating that response to the preprint back into the peer review process that may go on around that particular piece of work. And we're seeing the beginnings of that at the moment, and we'd like to do that a bit more. As far as medRxiv is concerned, simply getting going. That's the next big thing.
So I'll answer or talk about the question that I can't answer. which is number 3. What's the long-term business model? And I think there's a lot of experimentation going on that, and also a lot of uncertainty. And even if you look at Archive and SSRN, Archive was started at Los Alamos Lab and supported by DOE. DOE decided enough, and then it went to Cornell, and has been variously grant-supported and volunteer-supported since then. And all of the preprint servers have a variety of volunteer support and various levels of society support. But that is for many of these, it's a long-term open question. As bioRxiv is supported, as John mentioned, by Chan Zuckerberg. Many of the ones that were on the list at both John Sachs and my slides were at the Center of Open Science, which has primarily been supported by the Laura and John Arnold Foundation. But the long-term support for those is a work in progress. I don't think it yet keeps me up at night, but it might soon. ESOR has been variously supported by AGU and Wiley and Adipon, so thank you for that. But that's a discussion that we and all of us are kind of having long term is how do we do this? And again, why I think engaging the entire scholarly publishing community and recognizing the complementary advantages of preprint servers and the service they provide can help that discussion along. And so we really need your engagement on that as well.
Cool. Thanks. Over to you. Your questions. And so why don't I just start? Yeah, whoever gets the microphone first gets to ask the question. Why don't we start in the front, Craig, and I'll just repeat the question if people can't hear it.
Craig Van Dyke from the Fox Archive. You said that the preprints get revised. Is there a closing time, or are they susceptible to revision in perpetuity? So
is there a closing, like comments closed on preprints, revisions, or can they keep getting revised and revised and revised?
They can be revised in perpetuity, provided that paper has not been accepted by a journal. And it's, 60% of what appears on bioRxiv is published in 2 years, which means that 40% isn't. And we are beginning to see some behavior amongst authors of going back to their preprint and updating it, sometimes a considerable time after they first posted it, and signaling, at least informally and anecdotally to us, that they have no intention of submitting it to a journal. For them, its existence there is enough. It has a DOI, it can be cited, it can be discovered, so they're happy with that.
I would say most of the preprint servers have version control and are transparent about the prior version record. So it can be revised, but the prior versions are available.
But I also think there are some preprint servers who do allow, who don't have the same rule.
Yep.
They allow postprints. So that Archive and SSRN, for instance.
And all the Center for Open Science.
Okay, and the Center for Open Science. So there's a difference, and some do, they call them postprints, revisions after the publication, the version of record.
I've got a follow-up question on that. Daniel Hurley from Sage Publishing. So does each version of a preprint then have a separate DOI?
Yes. Oh.
No.
So one yes, two no.
Maybe.
If it's different enough.
This is where Brooks' plea for common standards is very well intentioned. So we had some consultation with Crossref at the beginning, and decided that we would not have separate DOIs for different versions because, frankly, it was just a pain in the neck and very confusing for readers and people who wanted to cite things. We are now going to be moving to a different form of DOI, which encodes the date of posting of that version. So much of the DOI will remain the same, but the last part of it will be a kind of signifier of at least the date, not the version number, but the date at which it was posted.
Hi, this is John Gerstel from American Political Science Association. What's the role of open peer review vis-a-vis the discussion or commenting features on a preprint platform? And if you have such a feature, how do you verify the users who are commenting?
So we don't yet, but that's one reason we've standardized on ORCID. We're talking about putting commenting in, and still someone can create a fake ORCID and things like that, but there's at least a broader community acceptance around ORCID and linking that to a scholarly record. So as we move towards commenting on it, that's what we'll do. So we do not envision open forum. There are open review journals in the Earth and Space Sciences. In fact, a lot of them, one of the major publishers, the European Geophysical Union, mostly has, of their 15 or so, 16 journals, most of them are open peer-reviewed journals. And our conversations with them, they're actually supporting ESOR, is that there would still be posting on even of those journals. They have a particular way that they develop those, but as I mentioned, those journals are not really community platforms. They don't allow searching across the community and things like that. So we're still considering that posters and preprints would be deposited on the preprint server for that. So we're considering it separate from what has been established in our field as open peer-reviewed journals.
John?
So when you said peer review, my immediate thought was, well, we don't do peer review, but now I realize, thanks to Brooks, that I think you're really talking about commenting. And we have commenting on bioRxiv. About 10% of the manuscripts have comments associated with them. At the moment, we're using the commercial module Discuss, which doesn't really lend itself to the paraphernalia of scholarly publishing very well. We are looking at other ways of improving the commenting function, which would include things like Hypothesis, the annotation platform. And at the moment, so Discuss allows pseudonymous posting, and we therefore do as well. It's not very satisfactory, but it's what we have. And it's part of a broader sort of strategic thinking about how to improve the amount of feedback that an author might get on a preprint, and bring that comment more into the sort of mainstream of consideration of the preprint.
And at SSRN, we don't have commenting now, but we're working on getting it with Hypothesis in the next year.
John, on the comments that you have, do you moderate them?
Yes.
Okay. Next.
Gunther Eisenbach from JMIA Publications. We've been running our own preprint server for the past 10 years, and it started as an open peer review project. So when authors submit something to our journals, they can opt into open peer review, which means we make the submitted manuscripts openly accessible. It gets a DOI, and people can sign up as a formal peer reviewer for this paper. And we also assign separate DOIs for each revision. My question is, one of you said once it's up there, it cannot be removed, which is legitimate, because if it has a DOI, there's an expectation of persistency, people cite it, and so on. On the other hand, we are also getting requests from authors to remove the manuscript, especially if it's rejected by the journal, because then they want to send it maybe to another journal, and they have concerns that that journal sees that it was already submitted somewhere else, or it's already out there and it has been rejected. Or sometimes the peer review process also reveals fundamental problems with the paper, right? And then the question is, shouldn't it be removed, right? So I wonder if this is consensus among all of you who run preprint servers, that once it's out there, it should not be removed. So that's my first question. The other question I have is about the copyright and the licensing agreement, because I've seen some preprint servers which encourage Creative Commons license, which I think is also problematic, also for some authors, because then you lose control over where else it will be published. It will maybe cross-published on other preprint servers, who then in turn do not link to the version of record. Or it's also a scenario that a predatory journal picks up that paper and just publishes it without the author agreeing to it and without the author having any legal rights to even prohibit this, right?
So can we deal with both questions at once, just in the interest of speed, and just start from Brooks and move this way? Since
sorry,
you were the one
thinking about licensing and forgot the
so the first one was they
Removal.
check in, but they
take
don't
off.
check out.
We try to communicate authors that if it's getting a DOI, it's out there, people can find it, people can cite it, it's published. There are exceptions, obviously, for legal reasons. If someone's plagiarized something, but we're trying, at least on ESOR, that if you're going through a retraction or withdrawal purpose, which we hope authors will do responsibly, or if we have to, that we treat it the same way that scholarly publishing does. We put a retraction notice up there, but then make the content, the content would still be available, but it'd be clearly indicated that it was retracted. If it's plagiarized or something like that, or if there's, the author has posted stuff and they don't have the right to post, we would withdraw it. But that would be the one exception. On licensing, yes, I think authors, we need to communicate collectively as a community much better to authors about their rights and responsibilities with various licenses. We offer a series of licenses, including a limited use license, but also the CC licenses. And some authors want a CC license. The experience on that, PLOS has been publishing, 100,000 papers now under a CC license. And so it's not a unique problem to preprint servers. It's pretty much most of the open access journals are under a CC license. So the same problems with predatory publishers and things like that could occur there. I think that's a separate, larger discussion and shouldn't preclude the community from using a CC license.
I think we answered.
So we have the question of takedown. I mean, we are as dictatorial, if you like, as Brooks is. It is very problematic for readers if they cannot find something that has been indexed. I'm sure it's true of the other preprint service too, but bioRxiv is indexed spectacularly quickly by Google Scholar. And so taking a manuscript down is a pain for readers, and we do everything possible to avoid doing it. But there are occasionally legal reasons for that. Essentially, if an author lies to us, and then we discover, and that lying may take a variety of forms. I had a very interesting conversation with the chairman of an oncology department who said that there was a paper on bioRxiv from someone who had never worked in his department. So things like that do happen, and then we have to really take things down. What we haven't got, as far as I'm concerned, is a satisfactory method for signaling the withdrawal. At the moment, it's really just a 404, and we're working on a mechanism, a kind of taxonomy of withdrawal, so that we will indicate that the object is no longer there, and to some extent, why not? We're working out how best to do that in a sensitive sort of way. The question of licensing, we offer all the CC licenses, and we also permit authors to reserve all rights. And if you add, so 40%, I think at the moment, of all authors choose not to share. And then another 40% or so choose to share under limited circumstances. So in other words, only 20% of preprints on bioRxiv are CC BY. And opinions about that vary. As Brooks said, there are many publishers who believe that CC BY is very important to open science, and we feel that this is an author's choice, and we probably should do a better job of explaining to authors what the implications of their choice are.
Charlie, did you have any?
I can just sort of quickly reiterate. I think that idea that the preprint, once up, should stay up is a pretty consistent thing among all preprint servers, as is with SSRN, and we allow our authors to choose what sort of license they want.
All right.
Great, thank you. Hi,
Kathleen?
Kathleen Gaffney. My question is similar with regard to copyright. If for content that is on a preprint server under a CC BY or even with limited rights, when it seems to be a problem. What I can't get my head around is it's out there under Creative Commons license, then it is submitted to a traditional journal that requires copyright transfer. How do you transfer the copyright? The author can't transfer that copyright because it's the bulk of that content already exists under Creative Commons. So I'm just wondering, from that perspective, have your lawyers been, like, what is their position on, because I do fear that there's a potential long-term impact on the business model for traditional journals. It really makes perfect sense, and I don't see a whole lot of barriers for going from a preprint server to an open access journal. But a preprint server to a traditional journal that requires copyright transfer, it just seems that we could be potentially threatening the long-term health if at some point in time there is the brand of the journal isn't as important, something has replaced impact factor as, and this is probably 15 or 20 years down the road, but I don't know if you have thoughts on that. It's funny because over the last day, I've been talking with people here at the meeting, and everyone said, "Oh, go to the session tomorrow. They'll be able to answer your question."
So we all have the same answer. We're just afraid to say it.
Okay, please say it.
No, I think that, I'm not a lawyer, so let me just say that straight out. But in talking with lawyers about this issue, it does seem that there's a certain amount of uncertainty, let's say. The way I sort of rationalize it is that if I'm the author and I put my version on bioRxiv or any of the preprint servers, then my intent is that I share my work in that context. That does not, it seems to me, prevent me from then making a later decision to transfer the copyright in that work to your journal, if that's what you wish me to do, and I'm happy to do it.
Would we be encouraging our authors then to retain the copyright rather than signing a Creative Commons license?
I don't think you need to do that. I mean, it's all about author choice, isn't it? And if you have the kind of a journal with the kind of heft in your community that makes people want to publish there, then I see no reason at all why an author can't say, I'm giving you my copyright in this version of my manuscript, which I am choosing to give to you.
Right. But if parts or great portions of that manuscript exist in the ether under a Creative Commons license, it seems contradictory.
Well, I mean, my feeling is that what matters here is that your journal has given this manuscript the imprimatur of having been accepted by your journal. So that makes it qualitatively different to the version that was put on a preprint server where there were absolutely no boundaries and absolutely no selectivity required. Okay. So it seems to me this is not as much of a threat to traditional journals as one might imagine it to be.
I must have too many lawyers in my family.
Always a bad thing.
Anybody else want to comment before we close on that question? Nobody wants to comment. Thank you for saying that, John. Thanks to our panelists. Thanks to you, the audience.